Okay, JD, you're covering the Stanley Cup playoffs. First off, before the Sharks conversation, we
Are
got
you going to
some.
say hi? Are you going to say hi? How are you
No, this
first?
is how
Or
videos start. I just start
okay,
with a
okay.
question.
I
We've
mean,
already
I'm good.
we've already
I'm
said
good.
hi.
Okay,
I
I
know
know,
you're good.
but the people don't know. People don't know.
You're covering some spicy series right now. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, it's right now that I mean, after last night with that Vancouver series, and then obviously the Boston series,
hmm
it's been highlighted by I don't want to say because one, I can't, but I don't truly believe like it's bad reffing. I know everybody's like up in arms because you can never please the masses. You're never going to come out of a series and be like, well, one side's going to be like, the reffing was great. Well, obviously, it probably benefited their team. So hard to go after him. There was some calls, I thought they're being as consistent as possible this playoff series, albeit that shot by Bennett, which I think was missed. And that now, especially with last game, with how he scored that goal, I mean, that's a tough one to come back from. So he's public enemy number one, and I think the reffing for Boston is public enemy number one. But last night with the Vancouver game, I mean, that one that one's an interesting series just because the goaltending issue highlights that big time with Edmonton. How he played so well this year, Stuart Skinner, and really good guy and really good competitor, and he's just kind of can't figure it out in the playoffs. And once again, the Edmonton Oilers get in a little bit of trouble, and they go to loading up the top line and playing them 30 minutes a night. And if that's what you're doing in round two,
Yikes.
I don't know if you have a chance to win the cup because you got to win with depth. And as you know, Brody, you covered the Sharks in those years we were so good. We did it by depth, and we still were missing some to
Yeah.
get us over the hump. But it was also goaltending. So it's scary. But then the end of that game with McDavid, you could argue that Susie, didn't intend to cross check him in the face, but unfortunately, you have to be in control of your stick. And I expect him to get a game at least, maybe two, because if McDavid's hurt in any capacity, I mean, he's out for the rest of the playoffs. So luckily, he's very flexible in his spine and his neck because he was able to absorb that without, other than probably having some bruises today. But it's an interesting playoff for sure.
Yeah.
It's been spicy. It's been as expected in terms of the teams winning, other than, I think Winnipeg really dropping the ball, but I think it's kind of played out everybody thought it would. And it's very, very, very interesting moving forward. So yeah, lot to unpack there.
So while that's all going on, it's amazing that somebody like me is just excited by the draft lottery that happened. And everybody's saying, well, it's already next season. Well, it's not next season. This season is still being completed with the playoffs. But for me, I've
Yeah.
already moved forward to next season. But what I'm realizing is that with the Sharks and their number one draft pick for the first time ever, this hits different for everybody around San Jose because this is unlike winning a game. This is unlike winning a series. This is unlike anything they've ever experienced before. Because if this works out well with Macklin Celebrini and with some others, you're going to get to enjoy what just happened with these ping pong balls for like years and years to come. So first off, what's your reaction to the Sharks getting this opportunity?
Well, before we all start celebrating, like the little celebrate, that was
That's
nice. No,
original.
that's original. Hasn't been used before. No, but I think everybody needs to temper their expectations because I still think the Sharks are a far way off. It's going to be very Bedard-esque if Macklin decides to come and play next year. He could be this great phenom, but he's going to have a learning curve in this Pacific Division
Right.
that now is starting to, gain some steam again with Vancouver, Edmonton. Calgary's going to be a little bit better next year. Anaheim's going to be better next year, and
Vegas.
Vegas, LA, like it's going to be still a murderer's row. So I
Yeah.
don't expect them doing much better than they did this year. They might do worse depending on who they bring in as a coach and who they bring in to fill those roles. So I think everybody's got to kind of weather, just be a little bit careful, tread carefully because we don't want to go into the season being like, the savior's here, Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini, and then these guys get absolutely shit pumped for 82 games, and everybody's like, well, they're horrible. No, I mean, I think there's a lot of work to do from Guernsey. Obviously, I think number one is going to be, now that you got these two prospects, you need to find the right coach to develop them. Maybe not the coach that's going to usher in the future, but the placeholder that is going to implement the culture that's now kind of been lost within that locker room. They need to bring that back of the days of, Jumbo and Pavs and even, Logan. Logan has been out all year, but I know Logan knows that something was lost a little bit in that locker room. So they need to kind of go re-implement that and refine that and find a new identity. So it's going to be important on the coach that's brought in here that he, whether it's a young coach that they're going to kind of have, they're putting and investing a future in to Celebrini and Will Smith so that they kind of grow together, or if it's an old veteran grizzled coach that's going to teach them structure, teach them how to play night in and night out, and maybe play a really ugly game. Because we could also look to the Kings when Todd McClellan was there, 6 years ago, about when they had nobody and Doughty was out for the year, and they just had a horrible team, and they decided we're going into a 1-3-1 and we're going to implement a structure that's going to keep us in games. And because last year, I think with Quinn, I just don't think that system was good enough or detailed enough for a team of San Jose's caliber to allow them to stay in games. I just thought it was a detriment to them, and it was a little bit disappointing that you also got to look at your roster and be like, listen, we might not have the best team in the league, but we could be competitive. And, there was flashes of it in the season, but I don't think there was ever a system that was in place to allow them to be in a lot of games. And they kind of just looked like they were just treading water and hoping that Blackwood or Kokkonen would steal a game or keep them within 3 goals. So it didn't look too bad.
Yeah.
So, that's going to be I think, number one, now that you got number one pick overall, is going to be for Guernsey, is finding the right coaching staff to put in place for next season, that whether it's Celebrini and Will Smith come and they stay a year, or if they stay a year outside, you're having a coach that's coming in and putting a team structure together that is going to ensure them in the next 5-10 years that they know how to play the right way, because last year wasn't good enough. Even though they didn't have the horses, it just wasn't good enough structurally as a team, as an NHL franchise to have that kind of play that they were demonstrating throughout the year.
I don't think there was like a bad feeling about David Quinn. He had a hard job, and I wasn't surprised that they let him go, but I also wouldn't have been surprised if he had stayed for this year or beyond or whatever, or got a true opportunity. I feel like hard to really grade his work based on the tools he had to work with. So I kind of go both ways on the coaching change. I don't feel any one way about it.
It's interesting because historically with him, his teams have always given up a lot of chances and a lot of shots against.
Yeah.
And defensively, the structure's never really been there. And the thing that I noticed, watching the Sharks games this year, was that there's a lot of confusion in the D zone, and I only put that on the players for so long before that's a coaching issue, because, as a NHL player, knowing where to go in the D zone is very important, and then also applying that. So I think to a certain point, these guys there wasn't the best team on the ice, but there's NHL players in that locker room. It's not like it wasn't like it was my Monday night beer league team, which they're still a great hockey team, my Monday night beer league team, but we have to give the players some credit that they can play some hockey. So I just think there's too much confusion and too much gray area within the structure. So I think Guernsey saw that, and Guernsey kind of realized it throughout the year and just wanted to let the year play out. And again, no knock on Dave Quinn. I think he's a great human being, and I've heard good things about him, but I just think for that team, there needs to be a ton of structure down to like where your skates are pointing at all times, really taking out any of the guesswork.
So it sounds to me like there's two things that need to happen here for the next head coach. Number one, they have to be good with young players. They have to be a developer. They have to be somebody who is just in tune with that. But number two, this next head coach is probably going to have to be the one to turn a corner with the Sharks. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to have to get closer to a winning record, to competing for the playoffs. This next person, and we didn't really expect that of David Quinn, but it does feel like this next person has some very defined things they need to accomplish, right?
Yeah, and from on ice standpoint and a culture standpoint within the room, they need to become a team that is just so resilient mentally, and whether that starts off ice, so it's brought onto the ice, they just need to be a team that no matter what, if you're going in and they won 10 games next year, any team that goes into that building is like, well, we have a hard game. We're going to, this team may not be the best, but they're going to play the right way. And if we don't mind our P's and Q's, they're going to put some pucks in the net. So, and I think, they have some pieces there. They have some guys, I think, in the system that could, if they take a step forward, could really help. And so I don't think it's as dire, they're going to be the worst team ever of all time, but I think it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be an uphill battle, but it's going to be, to your point, the next coach that comes in has to move the needle forward.
Yeah.
Like, let's move the chains. Like, now it's the time to we got to take some steps forward. So at the end of next season, we're like, okay, we didn't have a great season, but there is bright spots, whether Macklin's there and Will Smith is there or not. I think there needs to be a sense of an exhale for fans being like, okay, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel now, because at the end of this year, you didn't really see much light. And, wishing for a first overall pick in a draft lottery isn't a great way to go day to day in an organization, being like, we need a messiah and a savior to come save us.
Well, for 1 or 2 years, it's fine, but for year after year, like, you can't, you can't bank on that. But I also want to bring up the draft in this way. The Sharks not only get the first pick overall, which is what everybody's focused on. That's what the excitement's all about. But they also get Pittsburgh's 14th overall pick. They also get the 33rd pick, which is the first one of the second round. They also get the 42nd pick, which was that Devils pick that comes over to San Jose. So 4 picks in the top 42 of 2024. I mean, this is a very important draft. There are still a lot of key decisions to be made. Like, there's a lot of other critical, pivotal stuff, and almost in the sense where Celebrini's the no-brainer, right? That's the easy draft pick. Everybody's pinpointed him. He's number one. The Sharks are actually lucky that this is not a year where there's 1 or 2 or 3 different, first pick overall candidates. They're so lucky that the first pick is a no-brainer. What do you see even possible in getting a couple other good players from this draft?
Well, you hit it on the head in terms of, this is a big year for the scouting department in San Jose, and then obviously the development department. They need to take a deep look. And they have my phone number. So, but on the development side of things,
wait, what would you do? You want to scout? You want to help? Well, you want to help develop?
Oh, you give me a couple of these defensemen, and I'll turn them around. You give me those defensemen from last year, and we'll be real dialed in. You won't be giving up much.
Wait, on or off the ice style? I don't know. What are we talking? Oh, hockey. Hockey.
On the ice. Oh, hockey. On the ice. Okay. Off the ice, we stay away. Yeah. I'm an on the ice guy. We stay away off the ice.
Don't follow anything he does off the ice, but on the ice.
Well, nowadays, it's real. I'm real tight, so it's good now. Just took me 35, 36 years to figure out the off ice portion.
The kids are like, wait, I'm listening to a guy they used to call Daddy. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do what I do on the ice. That's the thing. Do what I do on the ice. You can listen.
Let me ask you about this. For Celebrini and Smith, like, they kind of have some decisions to make here. Staying in college is an option. Trying the NHL is an option. I'm sure this is a group decision and conversation ultimately when everybody's drafted and all that stuff. So from you, in the player perspective, you've been there, done that. Now you're removed from it. So I think maybe you even see it better. If you're them, what would you do?
You said it great before we pressed record and we were talking beforehand. I think it's a conversation they need to have together. I think they need to get together as a pair with Greerzy and have a long conversation, because these are your 2 franchise guys. This is the future of your team. You need to lay it out for them. And I know, we're in a new world and a new NHL. where, the young guys kind of are given the mantle early. And it's not so much a earn it when I started, and you got to kind of go through all the veterans and then you learn how to play. It's really much the young guys kind of get the torch passed them early. So I think if I'm Guernsey, I'm like, listen, this is our plan. This is what we want to do. This is where we see you guys. What are your guys' thoughts? But, I would implore him to kind of stress upon those two guys that, listen, we'd love to have both of you at the same time. If it's me, I'd rather have both of them together growing up. Under the same head coach, same time, playing with the same players, rather than have one come in for a year,
Right.
have another. I'm like, you guys are going to be together. Let's learn. You guys are going to kind of develop as a pair, so you have somebody to lean on when things get tough. I think Bedard this year didn't really have that outlet, that other young guy. There was young guys on that team, but he didn't have that other top pick to be like, hey, it's tough. And, you could say they had, Vlasic was there and Korchinski, and they brought some young guys in. But I think up front, it's important that Will Smith and Celebrini are kind of on the same page. So I think having them come in together, and whether they wait a year too, if they wait a year and the Sharks try to go for another first overall pick, I mean, it's the world we live in. I don't love it, but I think it's something that's worth considering for this team for sure.
It makes the experience more relatable if a Smith has a Celebrini and a Celebrini has a Smith and vice versa. And let's also not forget the other handful of young Sharks players, but it kind of begs that question of like, do you actually want to bring everybody up all at once, or do you want some of that core group to be together there at the same time? What would next season be like for Celebrini and Smith if they did join the NHL? Because that's a pretty big leap for young college players. And I mean, Celebrini was the youngest Hobey Baker Award winner ever, right? So he's just totally young in this. And I also kind of harken back to William Macklin. When he joined the Sharks in the NHL, it was clear after just 8 or 9 games at a time those first 2 years that he could do this, but you kind of worried and wondered about sustaining it over like a long season, like he just did for his first full season. What would the experience be like for those guys?
Well, you don't want them to get bad habits. And, with Willie, he seemed to break those bad habits as the year went on, or tried to, but it was a struggle because you're always playing from behind and you're always chasing games and you have to cheat, and it just doesn't lend itself to great development. So I think it's going to be growing pains for him a little bit, but if I'm the Sharks, I bring back Patty Marleau, I bring back Joe Thornton, I bring back Jason Demers, Setaguchi. Let us lace them up and just insulate these young kids with just the teams of old, and maybe bring back Rob Blake and put him back there and just help out these young kids. So
boy, you're really omitting Dan Boyle. Is that on purpose, or is that
Boiler? Because he's gonna take my power play ice away. That's why.
There's only so many blue line spots.
Yeah, there is. No, I think they need to, and obviously it's tough to go ask veteran guys in the league to come in and play in a losing team potentially.
Yeah.
Without paying them. So, like Chicago did with Nick Foligno. So I think it's going to be finding the right guys, and you might have to just go, hey, we're going to go ultra young and we're going to bring all these guys up at the same time, bring in a few veterans, and that'll be it. But goes back to what we were talking about with the importance of the coach you bring in is going to be
a good experience
for next year.
Yeah, a good experience.
Enormous.
Is it selfish of all of us, right? And I don't know, fans, media, people surrounding the Sharks who will not be making this decision ultimately, that say, you know what, I just want to get these guys here. Obviously, people are interested. The fans are excited. From a business perspective, like, how could you not want to get these guys here ASAP? So I guess my question is, how do you balance of course, we're all selfishly wanting to see them soon. How do you balance the patient side versus doing what's best and what's right by the young players?
Just honesty, being honest with the fans and letting them know that, listen, this isn't going to be the Sharks fans are very knowledgeable. People will say, well, it's California, the fans don't know nothing. But I think, having played there and lived there for a while, fans understand the game. And as you saw last year, I mean, fans still came out regardless of how underperforming the team had done, and how much they underperformed. They still came out and they still understood that it's a process. And I think keeping that honesty with them is important, and just being like, listen, it's going to be an uphill battle. It's going to be a struggle, but we have to develop these guys the right way for the next 10, 15 years, which is more important than this next year. So I think fans will be excited to see these guys. You know, if you look in Chicago, fans still came out for Bedard and those guys, even though they were, you know, they just didn't have a great year, and they supported. So I think the fans are loyal in San Jose. They'll support the team. It's as long as there's honesty and there's a little bit of give and take in terms of what the plan is. I don't think Jersey should hold his cards tight to the chest. I think it should be out in the open for at least the next few years of what we're doing. And I think he's done that so far.
Yeah.
And I think he just needs to continue to be like, here's my hand. Like, this is what it is. I'm not hiding anything. This is what we're going for in a coach. This is what we're going for in players to come, and just be an open book, because that allows fans to kind of digest it a little bit better, and then not be so reactionary whether Macklin comes in next year or he takes a year off, and not takes a year off, but plays elsewhere. College, and plays college, and same thing with Will Smith. So I think it's just important with the fans just to keep a level of honesty always.
All right, 2 more decisions for the Sharks to make. We've already talked a lot about the head coach situation. Do you think, an internal search? Do you definitely want to go external with this coaching search? Do you want to bring back some familiar names? Todd McClellan's out there. Jay Woodcroft is out there.
Jay Woodcroft's out there.
Joel Ward is out there. Jay Leach is out there. And there are some others out there.
Jason Demers is out there.
Wait, you wanted to be a scout or a development coach?
I'll do everything.
Head coach?
No, development. I like Mike Ricci's job. That's mine. I'd like to be his assistant.
There are so many people kind of in the sphere of consideration. Where would you start with this? And I don't know. Is it fair? Do you have a favorite? Do you like any of those names I just mentioned? Or how do you see this?
I mean, I think familiarity might be good, especially gives you a little bit of bump with the fans. It gives a little bit of a pop, bringing somebody that they know.
Greerzy played for Todd, by the way.
Yeah. You have Todd. I don't know about Todd, because I think Todd might be not looking to rebuild the team like he did in LA. I think Todd will be looking to take an already established team. I think Jay Woodcroft is a great pick. Yeah. Or, you know, a guy like Jay Leach as well. And I mean, listen, there's a ton of candidates out there right now, because they seem to just be firing coaches left, right, and center. But I think the structure that Woody brings, and having been with him in Edmonton for a brief stint and talking to guys, I mean, he does bring a very relaxed but borderline, very structured military style in terms of guys know where they're going. It's very detailed. And for a young kid, I think it's important to have that kind of structure. So I think he's kind of one of those guys that I think is definitely being considered by the Sharks. And just with him having been there, lived there, loved it there,
right?
It would be a good partnership, because he just knows that city and knows the fans. And him also starting as a video coach and kind of elevating himself. I mean, it's kind of a very poetic return, and fans, I think, would be very receptive to it. And then, you know, having coached McDavid and Draisaitl, I think, is also important.
Great point.
That you've coached top guys, so you know how to handle them. And he coached them, you know, he got them not young, but he got them almost at their end result. So, and he got a lot out of them, let's be honest. Like, you know, he elevated their game, you know, not that they needed it, but I thought he was a good teacher for them. And they liked him a lot. So that's an important thing, is a guy that's able to manage not only the lower end guys in the team, but the top guys. So I see him kind of maybe taking a run at it. And I'm sure Jersey's considered that. I would probably go for somebody with more structure, and somebody that's been around a little bit longer than a new hire, because
so it's got to be like, because McClellan and Woodcroft have coached obviously in the NHL. They've been the head coach versus some of the other names I mentioned they haven't. So you're saying it should probably be somebody with that on their resume.
I think you need it for at least, you know, you have to give it another go with a veteran coach.
Yeah.
I just think having that many young guys it's tough. But if you look at like Nashville with Brunette, like, they got a guy that was, Brunette had coached, but not a ton of head coaching experience. And he got a lot out of those young guys. So there's many ways in taking it. It's more deciding, I think, for Guernsey of what style you want to attack as a team. And it goes back to what I said with their biggest thing is finding an identity.
Right.
What's going to be their identity? Are they going to be high flying? Or are they going to be a structured team? And what do you want to get out? So I think the coach is going to be tailored around that. And obviously, when the coaches come in and do their interviews, they put in a ton of work and ton of time. I heard those interviews for coaches are pretty intense in terms of what they're presenting to Guernsey of what they want to bring to the team and what style of play within the realm of, they have to research all the guys that are on the team and be like, with what you guys have, this is what I'm going to implement. So I think it's going to be the indication of who he hires is going to kind of show you what direction they're going in. If he hires a Daryl Sutter-esque, which I don't expect him to, but you kind of know which way they're leading versus if they go young,
right?
Well, you're like, okay, we're looking to be exciting and fresh and new. So it's very much going to be telling what they bring in. But I think Woodcroft would be a good pick with some, I had Dave Manson as well as the D coach. And, I got to speak with him a little bit. That's kind of his partner. And they're both very good and very talented. And obviously Todd's always a favorite of mine, but I just don't know if Todd will be vying for a job like that.
Yeah.
I don't think he wants to go through the growing pains again. I definitely think Todd wants to really win. And I think this would kind of be more him chasing a Devils, Toronto.
Sure. Those jobs are open.
Yeah, we're open for business.
Toronto's wide open right now.
Yeah.
So let me ask you the last thing here. So it's kind of the timing of all this coming together. When the draft is late June. I think the Sharks might have a head coach picked out before that point. Like, I feel like that's the draft, right? So you got to have that. But then you also have to figure out pretty soon after the draft, that's when NHL free agency opens up, like, how are you going to build your team? So we've already established the coach is probably going to be selected by the draft. Then the draft's going to happen. And when free agency opens up, what do you see the Sharks building themselves as this year? And I suppose some of that depends on whether you're going to have the kids there or not. But what do you see the rest of the team looking like in terms of what they might add, how they might do it? Because they now do have some cap space.
They do. And, you have to have guys willing to come there. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you just said, they need to get a coach. I think they'll announce a coach in the next month, middle of June, early June latest, because you want your coach to come in and put his footprint. Because if you're doing a rebuild, you need the coach that's here to, if Guernsey has a master plan, he wants a coach for 3-4 years before he brings in the coach.
Right.
Or if he's going to get the coach now that's going to kind of usher in these young guys, he needs to have a say in what he wants as his free agency guys, because that's just as important. I think that's more important than getting Macklin right now, because I know it for myself, being lucky enough to come into the organization at, 21 and having that group of veterans around me. I mean, I wouldn't have got where I got in the NHL without those guys and their guidance. It's incredible. And it's something that's so undervalued and not talked about enough in the NHL, and that just these young guys that can get into a great insulated group of veterans that teach them the right way to play, I think is so important. And you can't have the inmates running the asylum. And what I mean by that is you can't have the young guys taking over. If you look at like Anaheim right now, they tried to bring in some veteran guys, but they're outnumbered with these young guys. And if you look at the Zegerases and the McTavishes, and they just don't play the right way. They don't play defensively enough. You look at Buffalo. Buffalo has not brought in the right veterans, and the same thing happens every year with that team. They just don't know how to play the right way. They haven't built a culture of winning there. And it's not to be hard on the guys or anything, and you just don't know. You learn how to lose.
It matters. This group of players matters that you surround them with.
You learn how to lose as a kid when you come into a league, and you learn that, I'm still getting rewarded. I'm still getting paid, even though we're not making the playoffs. Well, what's my incentive
Mm-hmm.
to actually block that extra shot late in the season? As long as I'm getting my points and getting my money, and it's not an indictment on any player in the NHL saying, all these kids, I do believe, want to win, but wanting to win and learning how to win. Like, I wish I never won a cup. I went to some conference finals, played in some game sevens, and I've just learned from watching losing the games and
Right.
also winning them what it takes to win, and it takes a toll on you. And whether you win or not, you have to be into those trenches and in those battles as a player. And you need to be around guys that have been in those battles. I was around Stanley Cup champions, and you kind of take it for granted in the moment when you first started the NHL, and you're like, I'll get back, I'll get back. And you never do, because you end up going on teams that don't bring in the right guys, and you don't have the right collection of guys that understand the importance of winning and understand what it takes to win. It's a sacrifice, not only on your body, but on your mind and your time. You really have to dedicate fully your life and your season and your well-being to that goal of winning the cup. And you see the teams that win now, and the cream rises to the top in the playoffs, and you see the teams, it always irons itself out. You can't hide in the playoffs. I was always told that it doesn't matter how good your season is, you're judged, especially once you get into your first playoff series. It tells a lot about who you are as a player and what kind of guy you are when things get tough, because you're going to get tested. So it's, those guys that never make the playoffs, it's, you don't even know what it's like. The players in Buffalo and Anaheim that haven't been, you have no idea what it's like to make it into the playoffs, and then what it's like to win the playoffs. So I think it's very important to have guys with that perspective, because everybody watches, the young kids come in and they watch Instagram and TikTok, and they see the Michigan and they see how nice it is to do all these moves and the toe drags. But if you watch 5 minutes of the Florida Panther series, or you watch the way Vancouver's played, it's, those guys are sacrificing everything to win. And if you think that you're going to come in as a young kid and what it's like in NHL playoffs, I mean, you have a rude awakening. And I learned firsthand how tough it could be. And I'm so grateful that I had just an amazing cast of veterans around me that were able to kind of prepare me for that, and not only prepare me, but push me and make sure I was ready for those games. And my only wish was that I would have been able to do more of that when I was on the Arizonas and the Floridas, and be able to kind of get that push. But it's a tough business we're in the NHL, definitely, just to win.
Social media told me it's wheel, snipe, selly. It's as simple as that. It's really not that hard.
That's it.
That's what you got to do.
If you watch any of these toe drag gurus, that's exactly what you need to do to win.
I'm more of a toe pick guru.
Yeah. How many toe drags have you seen in the playoffs so far, other than McKinnon?
How come when I skate, there's a lot of ruts out there that I keep finding all?
Well, we got to get the cage off you first, We got to get you big boy. No maybe a visor or something.
You'll figure it out. It's the money maker, man. It's got to pay the bills.
You do. You're a beautiful man.
Speaking of that, hey man, thanks for joining me. I didn't say hello, but I'll say goodbye. So there you go. There's my formalities. Thank you for doing this. We'll talk again soon.
Everybody loves to say goodbye to me. That's a weird thing. I just get used to it. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.